it's Nancy from Nancy Chu Homes at Keller Williams and J Metro Group. Everyone's talking about the FHA and the new FHA PMI reduction. So I did some research and found something interesting. So I kind of wanted to share it with you guys. So just to give you guys a little bit of background, the FHA is essentially a baby of HUD, which is the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Okay, and the FHA has a very specific mandate, and that mandate is the desire to be an alternative to the mortgage products that are on the market right now, and to increase affordability, especially for underserved communities. Okay, so Fannie and Freddie, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they currently comprise about 2/3 of the housing market in terms of transactions that are done, and they have pretty stringent credit requirements, right, in order to qualify for a Fannie or Freddie loan. Now, the FHA, which is a little bit different, now they only comprise about 15% of the overall real estate market in terms of transactions. And their mortgage insurance numbers are set by HUD. Now, as you guys know, there's been some calls, that's a nice way of putting it, but I think a lot of folks have been saying, hey, this PMI insurance thing is really rough. Can we reduce PMI for people who currently have FHA loans? So the last time that happened was actually, I think, around 2015. I think during Obama's administration, there was like a 50 basis point rollback on PMI that lasted for like no time at all. That disappeared really quickly. But this year, okay, back in February last month, the FHA made decisions to drop that PMI number 30 basis points. That takes you from about 85 to 55 basis points, okay? Now, I'm going to talk you through a little bit about what this is. Now, before I do that, I'm going to go back and say that I think that affordability has become a real touchstone for everybody, especially with, like we said, traditionally underserved communities, because even Fannie and Freddie have decided to implement some, I don't think it's across the board, but I do think that there are clients that now qualify for a loan level price adjustment waiver, okay? So in the past, someone's credit score can dictate what their mortgage rate is, right? And so it can go up and down. And I've had clients say things like, I got to pay off this loan so I can raise my credit score so that I qualify for this interest rate percentage, etc. So in other words, a lot of the time, the credit score and the debt to income ratio is a huge part of what affects that interest rate number. Well, Fannie and Freddie have said that they're going to allow for some waivers for that loan level price adjustment. So waivers would be great. Okay, waivers would be great. I was going to say, I think especially because right now with the affordability crisis, and I'm calling it a crisis because I believe it is a crisis, any sort of help I think we can give people would be fantastic. All right, so let's go back and sort of talk about what's caused the FHA to announce this decrease in PMI. So all FHA loans pay an upfront, mortgage insurance payment, and then sometimes they roll into the loan, but there's called a PMI upfront, and then every month they have a little piece of PMI insurance that they pay. All that money goes into what's called the MMI, which is the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Fund. Now, this is money that the FHA sets aside to pay lenders in case an FHA client goes belly up. So in other words, if someone defaults, then the lender can be made whole from the amount of principal that is still outstanding. They get paid out of this MMI fund, all right? Just so you know, this fund is meant to be kept at about 2%, all right, a 2% capital ratio. And the way that they calculate this cap ratio of 2 is what they do is they take the amount of money that's in the fund and they divide it by the total amount of FHA loan that's out there, okay? And they want to keep that number at around 2%. Okay, so surprise, surprise, at the end of last year, the MMI fund was at 11%. that's like almost 5 times the amount that is the minimum. So that would explain why a lot of people were like, we should reduce the PMI now. So, okay, bear that number in mind, the 11%, because I think it's going to come back around in an interesting way. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of, just to give you guys a little bit of kind of framework around what is an FHA program. All right. 80% of FHA buyers tend to be first-time home buyers, right? Because first-time home buyers often have less money down because they don't have a property that they can use as money that they pull out of equity from a previous property. Like, you know, that I keep talking about this equity buyer seller person. That person is someone who has equity in a previous property that has grown just simply by the growth of the market. And they all of a sudden they're like, oh, look, I found money in this property, and they take it and roll into their next house. Okay. First time home buyers are at a disadvantage because they don't have that. They only have what they can save, right? So, or inherit, or, you know, earn, or whatever. So just so you know, they tend to be first time home buyers. And across the board, FHA usually those purchase prices are often at half of the cost of the median price in a given area. Okay, I'm going to give you an example because I know that was a lot of words that sounded weird. Now, so for instance, if a town has a median price point of $1 million, as in like that's like their median, right? Their middle point, their midpoint, then most of the FHA loans in that particular neighborhood are probably less than 500,000. The FHA housing that is sold is probably less than 500,000 because once again, it is about half the cost of the median price of an area. All right. So that means that you're looking at the FHAs often are the bottom quarter of everything that's sold in a market area. And if FHA really only comprises about 15% of the market, which in general, as it does, that means that, you know, 15% of that bottom quarter might actually be FHA, but 10% of it is still conventional, okay, or cash. So, you know, it's not as pervasive. I think people think, you know, FHA, you know, I would tell you in some markets, FHA just isn't as pervasive as other loan products, okay? So nationally, the FHA home average price is only about 270,000. Now, let's talk a little bit about how this translates to savings, you know, like dollars, you know, dollars for donuts, okay? So for instance, in our market area, what you'll see in terms of savings of this 30 basis point drop in PMI, okay? If you have a $300,000 property, that, you know, sorry, if you have a mortgage amount of about 300,000, it probably saves you about $900 a year. If you have a $400,000 property, mortgage, it probably saves you close to $1,200 a year. And if you have a $500,000 mortgage, it probably saves you close to $1,500 a year, which, by the way, is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, what is $1,500 a year? $1,500 per year, a year for me is like almost 2 months worth of groceries. So this isn't just like piddling money, right? Like this isn't necessarily a situation where this PMI reduction is going to get people into the market who previously didn't qualify to be in the market, but it's going to allow people who currently have FHA loans, it gives them some alleviation against inflation so that they can keep the home that they're in, right? I mean, once again, $1,500, that feeds my family for 2 months. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm taking this and I'm excited. I'm taking this and running, right? If I have an FHA loan product. So let's put all this kind of together, right? Don't forget, this all stems from the current administration has a really strong mandate, and that mandate is to try to get people into homes and out of rental situations. Rentals, as we all know, renting is 100% interest, right? You pay someone else's mortgage, you never get anything back from it. But if you own a home, then you can start building equity, right? So that has been a really strong focus of this particular administration. And I think it's a really strong focus of the FHA right now. And I think that a lot of folks in government want this to happen for people. All right. Now, Here's the part that kind of circles around that I thought was interesting. I kept circling around the idea of 11%. Why did the FHA, why did HUD wait until the MMI fund was at 11% before they were willing to do a PMI reduction, right? And then I found a really interesting piece of data. And that piece of data was that during COVID, right? During COVID, there were more FHA borrowers than conventional borrowers that were in distress and forbearance. Okay, this is really interesting. Think about COVID. COVID was the first time in years, and also it was very extreme, where we literally woke up one day and a ton of jobs were gone because the world literally shut down. So think about all the restaurants, service industry things, travel, airlines, cruising. I mean, massage businesses, physical therapy. Think about all of these businesses that just went dead stop because of the shutdown. So this wasn't like we gradually saw jobs being lost. We're talking about people waking up and suddenly there were no jobs in a pretty big segment of the service industry. And of course, a lot of other things follow that, right? So it was a very extreme situation of job loss. So once again, the FHA borrowers had a higher percentage than the conventional folks of distress and forbearance. Don't forget, forbearance was relatively voluntary. There were people who chose forbearance because they wanted to make sure that since they weren't earning, they wanted to make sure that they could take advantage of a lot of the forbearance, rules that got put into place for them, right? And a lot of those folks have been able to recover post COVID. They got their loans back on track and they're fine again. But I was sort of surprised and then went to find out that 11% of FHA borrowers during COVID were the ones that were in distress or forbearance. And I was like, oh, now that makes total sense. Why they waited for the MMI fund to be at 11%. Because if COVID was the worst case scenario of job loss, right? Of having just a whole segment of your economy wiped out from because salaries just didn't exist. That whole service industry went kaput. Think about this. If 11% of FHA borrowers were in distress, then that's your worst case scenario if you wake up one day and half the jobs are gone. Or not half, but a ridiculous number of jobs are gone. So that's your worst case scenario, 11%. Like it's played itself out in front of us in the last 3 years. So now we actually have an actual benchmark for what percentage that MMI needs to get to. So it totally makes sense that they said 11%, we're good. We're going to be okay. We don't anticipate another COVID type experience where we wake up and all these jobs are gone, right? So hopefully we won't ever reach those distress or forbearance numbers again. So that was interesting. That piece of those two things just kind of went clicked in. And I was like, oh my gosh, this makes a lot of sense. So let's see how this goes. I think that we're going to continue to see more municipal and government attempts to help people through this affordability crisis. And I think this FHA PMI reduction is just one step in hopefully a litany of steps that they're going to take to help with our, affordability problems. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you watch us on YouTube, please like and subscribe because I was going to say we try to put out the best information and I'm going to try to keep putting information out there for you guys that you can use and help you understand the market, especially as you look to buy, sell, and invest. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, you can always reach me 917-992-3098 and I'll talk to you guys next week.